new day?
Well, that day keeps improving, really.
Mm.
Yes.
The clothes. What was it? The body, the cloth.
Good Lord.
What is it?
Body day inside cloth.
All right. It's even descriptive. The body is in the day side of the cloth. It's very good.
Body day inside cloth.
Yes. So,
Good heavens.
yes.
Like your cloth.
Yes. I like that word.
The cloth.
Cloth.
Yes.
It's clothes.
So if someone's wearing a hat, I say, I like your hat cloth. Yes.
How did the cloth?
Yeah.
I'll teach you guys pigeon by fire by force.
And
No.
what's Abi?
I
Una go learn 'em.
welcome that particular learning.
Oh, Abi is in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Abi.
It's a good day, Abi.
Yep.
Do you say Abi or Abi?
No, you say Abi.
Abi. Okay, let's take a look at what's in the headlines. Starting with the Standard, Ndu.
Well, I will go for the headline. Uhuru summons Mount Kenya leaders over BBI tensions and says, you just come. Let's have a conversation about what's going on. Presidents host restless MPs and governors at Sagana State Lodge in a push to unite a region split over the 2022 succession. And State House has been silent on the agenda so far. But, people are talking, they're complaining, they're whining, back and forth. So the president has decided, look, let's have a sit down and talk over some of these issues that seem to be dogging us. And let's see how we can have a united front, especially in the light of the elections that will come up in the next 2 or so years. He's set to meet them. Okay, invites for the meeting actually went out yesterday, even though official communication as to what was to be made by the time official communication was yet to be made by the time of going to press. Leaders from the region received calls from the respective county commissioners inviting them for the meeting, whose agenda remained tightly guarded. But I have a feeling we will know as soon as the meeting is over.
And the region is the entire central Kenya, Meru, Embu as well, Tharaka-Nithi, I've seen. As far as Nakuru, even Nakuru leadership has been invited, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting to note that at the same time, the president has been invited for traditional prayer session and ritual. He's been invited today to the Agikuyu Shrine, or it's Agikuyu Shrine, by elders affiliated to the Kikuyu Council of Elders. It's located at the base of Mount Kenya in Naramoru. According to the Kikuyu Council Elders Chairman David Muthoga, the president was invited as a leader of the community and country to join the elders for a traditional prayer session and ritual. We've invited him as a leader, though he has not confirmed his attendance. But if he comes, he's welcome, and we hope he will attend our session, according to Mr. Muthoga.
There's a paragraph here, or paragraph 3 of the story in the Standard, page 6. According to some of those invited, Deputy President William Ruto will not attend.
Well, he's not from there. Is he from there? He's not a Mount Kenya leader.
He's not a Mount Kenya leader, right?
What I'd like to see is those who will not attend. And what I'd like to see is some of these fellows who have taken it upon themselves to speak directly against the president to do so in his presence.
They will be there.
What kind of feedback they actually do give him in his presence?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
You may not be able to see it unless you're there, unless you've been invited. But let's hear.
The seeing usually comes after. Yes.
Yeah, you will know after the meeting has taken place.
And then my sight is treated to the effect.
The drama after.
Yes, via this very medium that we are now looking at.
Tulimuambia.
Yes.
See, make una no vex, but I just have to highlight something else that's happening in the Standard as well. Eyes on Joho after he drops his entire cabinet. By yesterday, at the stroke of midnight on Tuesday, Governor Hassan Joho's entire cabinet was swept out of office. All the ministers were forced to leave office upon the expiry of their 2-year contracts. Significantly, all the contracts came to an end on the same day, sparking anxiety that the wholesale departure could create a vacuum. But officials said yesterday the transition would be seamless. Deputy Governor William Kingi, who also served as Education Minister, said there was nothing unusual about the move. It's just that the time has come to an end, and everybody basically needed to leave, and we would see then who would come in next, or whether they would reapply for those positions. So the eyes are on him after he drops his entire cabinet.
So the CEC is basically unconstituted for now.
Yes.
Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning. The CEC what? Sorry?
The CCMs, right?
Oh, CCMs. Oh.
Not CC, sorry.
Right.
Another headline here, named the contraceptives killing your libido. This is a story that's actually saying that the kind of contraceptives that people are using have an impact on their libido. The study finds that women who have everything they need for a great sex life, love, money, education, are being denied one of the life's simplest pleasures by hormonal contraceptives. It's a big story on page 4 of the Standard, and it now goes to say that they conducted a study, contraceptive use and prevalence of female sexual dysfunction, that's FSD. Participants on hormonal contraceptives, those who have implants with female sexual dysfunction, 44. Total eligible 70. So 70 out of 70 people, 44 had reported FSD. That's about 62% in people who are using implants. Oral contraceptive pill, 56.8%. Injectables, 47.1%. Hormonal coil, 38.5%. Transdermal patches, 29.2%. Those who are not using hormonal contraceptives are also reporting FSD. Male and female condoms, 35%. Natural method, 35%. It's also a high percentage as well.
Remember there was a time we were discussing this Kenyan who also happened to have U.S. citizenship.
Yes.
Yes, there's a lady whose name is Mwinzi. Yes, Mwinzi is her name. The courts ruled in her favor. The High Court said, given that she was born in the U.S., she cannot actually renounce that citizenship. So she is to take up her post. That is what the High Court has ruled. So all that noise that the parliamentarians made was for naught.
It would be great if some noise was made in a good,
It's interesting.
No, it
because
was
that
good.
progressive direction.
That ruling could have actually said that because she cannot renounce her citizenship, she cannot take up this position. That's what you'd have thought would have given the drafters' intention sentiments. Because the idea here, of course, it's patriotism, isn't it? The fact that your dual citizenship could be compromising if you're going to represent the state outside the country. If you can imagine a situation whereby she's having to negotiate, whether it's trade or borders, whatever it is, we negotiate with other countries, and it's to do with it's between us and the Americans. Which side would she take? This is what the drafters of the legislation that forbids or asks you to renounce citizenship. This is what they had envisaged when they were putting in this legislation. So it doesn't actually cover that conundrum by them just saying she can't renounce her citizenship.
She's the one who took the case to court, right?
Absolutely.
So her application was, should I renounce my citizenship? Maybe the judge just dealt with what
that she can't renounce her citizenship,
and that was it.
I think that's for the Americans to decide actually whether or not
you can't force her
she
to
can
renounce her citizenship by birth.
Well, she could renounce it, but it's not renounced by the Americans if you're born there. I think that's for the Americans to decide. The facts that should have been decided here, or the legal principle that the judges should have used this case to decide, was as a result of having dual citizenship, because you cannot renounce, should you be given a position whereby you're representing the state outside the country.
But if nobody has gone to ask the court that?
No, I think the court circumvented this. I'm sure the courts were aware that was the principle of this case.
But she didn't ask them that. If she didn't ask them that,
No, the courts can use platforms and cases to decide a number of different things. It doesn't have to be one legal
for
principle.
this particular reason, now that you've brought yourself to us, we say, yes, you cannot be forced to renounce your citizenship by birth. But also, we hear from other quarters that you've been nominated. And we say that you cannot take up your nomination.
That's what they should have been deciding on, because that's where the ambiguity or the conflict in the Constitution or the absurdity lies. And that's the legal principle they should have been detangling for us.
But I thought that courts normally debate and deliberate on what is brought before them.
Yeah. No, you can have in a court. No. You can have even utterances can be somewhat persuasive.
So you're saying that courts do not debate on what is brought before them.
No, they do, but you can go further than that. They're not limited to that. In a court, you have what you call, or in a case, you have the ratio decidendi, which is the main principle that's being decided, the legal principle. But you have obiter, which is other utterings that can not necessarily, they're not binding to the lower courts, but they can be persuasive, and a lot of law can then be formed over that. So in a judgment, if you look at the reasoning, even if it's not the main or core principle that's being decided, even utterances by judges, especially say the Supreme Court, can be somewhat persuasive on lower courts. So it was an opportunity to actually clarify the law here, because it's very rare an opportunity like this comes along where the constitutional judges are being asked to interpret an ambiguity in the law or an absurdity. So it was a good opportunity for them to clarify that, I think, and they didn't.
What's the latest with the stowaway story?
Well, now we have it being reported that this one gentleman now, who is Isaac Chivonje, is at the Kenya Prison's Industrial Area Remand. He's at the Industrial Area Remand Prison. And that was reports coming out yesterday. However, in terms of producing him, or at least being confirmed that he's on the list, the prison warders refused to do that yesterday. So it is said that he's there and had been arrested sometime in June, or rather been convicted on cases of defiling a child, and his father then went on, the said father, Mr. Isaac Betty, then went on to say that that is actually his son, and he's waiting to see if he'll be released on bail or on bond, and if that happens, he will be home in a few days. So there's still a bit of a mix mash.
So we have one person called...
we have somebody called Paul Manyasi. We have somebody called Isaac Chivonje. We have the father who's called Isaac
alike,
Betty. They look alike. Previously, the father had said his name was Isaac Manyasi. He has now changed that and said that his name is Isaac Betty. Interestingly enough, the name on his identification also is Isaac Betty. So, I mean... there's a whole mess. And with all of this, somebody did fall out of the sky and somebody did enter into a restricted area in an airport and actually did get onto the plane. So we'll be talking about this in more detail later. But I mean, there's a whole, it would be mess that is brewing over this particular story.
Wow. On the Star, what's the headline?
It's what you chatted about earlier. Kenyatta to face anti-BBI gang in Gema meeting. That's at the Sagana State Lodge. Brings together governors, senators, MPs, MCA, county commissioners, and sub-county representatives. And on the front page, there's photos of Alice Wahome, Dindi Nyoro, Kimani Ichung'wah, and Kate Waruguru. Of course, these were well-known Tanga sort of supporters. It's interesting the way they framed it, that it's almost Kenyatta the president going to persuade them to come back onto the Kweleke side. But I'm aware, and I have heard and I have knowledge that they're actually pleading for forgiveness, having gone on the Tanga side, and they want to join and realign themselves.
So they're the ones who asked for the meeting?
Absolutely.
Until we hear
this inside information.
No. That is how you frame propaganda.
No. Do you seriously think the president is going to go around begging anybody? They regret their moves. We know that Dindi Nyoro has had a lot of backlash from his constituents for having supported Tanga, and they've now seen that Tanga is really a movement you don't want to identify with, considering the fact that they're not towing the party line, considering that Ruto is still pushing for 2020 elections and ignoring the development agenda. So these are people who are actually sorry and are looking for forgiveness. The prodigal daughters and sons. So
I see. Less than 10 days ago, these people were out there, like you were telling us yesterday, defying the president by campaigning for McDonald Mariga. But today, less than 10 days later,
I think the litmus test,
the error of their ways.
Mariga and Kibra was the litmus test, and it turned out to be acidic for them, and they've decided they'd rather remain in neutral waters and friendly waters. So this is an opportunity to reconcile.
Let's see. So over the weekend, by Monday, you'll be giving it to us.
By Monday,
Kita
Eleweka. A nice one. Let me end with a story with a happy ending here. A teenager has reunited with her family 12 years later. She was displaced from her home at the height of the 2008 post-election violence. And the woman in question is Joyce Urongo and her 4-year-old daughter, who joined thousands of other IDPs at the Nakuru showground. She had lost her husband. This is Joyce Urongo had lost her husband in the chaos that followed the elections and was still grieving as she tried to fit in the new life at the camp. But in that camp, she lost her 4-year-old granddaughter, who just went missing. And she's been wondering, where is my granddaughter? Apparently, the granddaughter was taken up by child services and was taken to Tania Integrated Center, a children's home based in Kajiado County, where the girl has been living. Now, the Children's Department and the Tania Integrated Center have reunited her with her grandmother. And this was happening yesterday. Very happy ending. 12 years later, you lost somebody who was 4 years old, come back a 16-year-old girl. And initially, in fact, when the girl was looking at her grandmother, she couldn't really tell who is my grandmother here. But she knew that she's going to be reunited with her family.
It's a sad story too. I mean, those years of separation can't be made up for. And perhaps an opportunity for us to clean up the system. It's something that could have easily been communicated especially if she was in a state institution or an institution that's licensed by the state. They should have a duty to actually communicate, lost and found children or children that have gone missing that they've taken in. And given that it would have been if they took her from the show grounds, it would have been displaced people whom the government were in communication with to place them into homes and so on. It wasn't 40 million Kenyans that we're dealing with. It would have been 100,000 or whatever the figures were. So it would have been easy to reconnect them.
Indeed, actually, that's very true. The system is exposing itself here. So
Absolutely.
yes, it's worked, but it's taken so long.
All's well that ends well.
At the end of the day, as Dr. Mike likes telling, at the end of the day, all's well that ends well. Good morning. This is Spice FM. We've been taking a look at the papers. Remember, you can download the standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store for just one subscription fee. You can choose weekly, monthly, or annual. You get to access all of Standard Group's publications. Today is Friday, so you'd have access to the Nairobian. You have the Nation. You have the national paper. This is the Standard. And then you have the other publications, the Pambazuka and Mount Kenya Star. Good morning. 8:20 minutes past 6 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This is the Situation Room, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Eric Latif. We have C.T. Muga, Jerry Thorne, and Nduoko. We're broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.7 in Eldoret, 96.0 in Nakuru, 90.9 Nyeri, and 97.7 in Malindi. We always live stream this show, the Situation Room, which happens between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. We are on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on YouTube, Spice FM KE, on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Now, let me take you to a story that's, of course, came out of the courts yesterday. It's being reported on the page 10 of the Standard this morning. Murugi Galgalo Land Agency jobs nullified. This is the High Court has castigated President Kenyatta for nominating the ex-MPs to be vetted for positions that they had not applied for. So this case was taken to court. Of course, there was an entire process of recruiting and replacing the National Land Commissioners whose tenure expired about a year ago. And it took a while before the president set up a recruiting team. And this recruiting team advertised for the jobs. People applied for the job of either chairman or member or both. They shortlisted people for positions, for interviews for position of chairperson or member. And the people were, called in for the interviews. Of course, they went through the process, submitted names to the president. The president nominated a chairperson, nominated 8 members, sent the names to Parliament. The National Assembly invited these people, vetted the people, sent the names back to the president and said, we have actually gone through this whole process and you're okay to appoint them. Before the appointment happened, the case was taken to court by none other than Okia Omtata.
Surprise, surprise.
and the Katiba Institute. And he wasn't there. And among the many applications that he made a couple of applications. One of them was saying that we have people who had applied for position of chairperson, who were interviewed for position of chairperson, and then they were nominated for position of member. Now, was that right? And that's what the petition was. Was that right for them to be nominated for this position? And the court yesterday came out and said, no, actually, that was wrong. And therefore, these two, the rest are okay, but these two, because they had applied for one position and gotten nominated for another position, it was wrong, and this should happen again. Basically, here the court was faulting the process, not saying that the two are not qualified, not saying that the two should not sit anywhere or even be anywhere where issues of land commission are being discussed, but saying that it was a process that was flawed. And here we are faulting the process. And here, it take you back to even looking at the petition that was taken after the 2017 general election, where the court faulted the process by the IEBC to declare a winner, to count and collate the votes and eventually declare a winner. Courts are raising issue with process, and I say this is a very good thing because it tells our institutions, we are building institutions with this new constitution. It tells our institutions that you need to ensure that the foundations of this institution are based on good and concrete processes. It's a good thing that you've been told, look, if you didn't follow process, then you erred. So, Okiya Mtata had a couple of applications. One of them was saying, so the president appointed the team that was going to recruit the people, all right? And this team is actually in the Land Commission, National Land Commission Act. And it says the team shall have several people. The selection panel shall have several people. One shall be appointed by the president, shall be a presidential appointee, or somebody else shall come from the presidency, the national executive. Others shall come from, NGOs, NGO Coordination Board, and other bodies that are involved in land, for example. Bodies that are involved in land. So the composition of this is clear by law. The president went ahead and formed the selection panel, minus one member who is a member from the NGO Coordinating Board. And the reason that a person from NGO Coordination Board was not appointed was because the NGO Coordination Board at that point was having issues, internal wrangles. So they actually wrote back to the presidency and said, we don't have anybody that we can nominate at this point to join this panel because we have issues. And with that, the president went ahead and nominated and appointed the selection panel without this one member. Judge yesterday said, well, that was okay. We can see the reason why the president did not appoint this one person. However, even if it was improperly constituted, it was still legal because it had quorum. The other application, of course, was now with that was anything that this selection panel did legal, and the judge said yes, it was fine because it was okay the way it was sitting. It's fine to do its job. Then the question of these two particular members, Murugi and Galgalo, how do we find them in this commission as members, yet they had applied and were interviewed for chairperson? And the judge was saying, and this is Justice Helen Osilo of the Employment and Labor Relations Court, was saying, look, in terms of employment and human resource and recruitment, it's a very clear thing. If you've been interviewed for one position, you're either considered for that one position or you are dismissed for that one position. You cannot therefore now be told, okay, here it is that this is what you're going to get employed for. So it comes out back to the processes. Court has faulted process, and court has said, you have been wrong on this.
So it's the judge said here that it's my finding that the nomination of the two as members of the NLC, the National Land Commission, was unconstitutional, flouting principles of appointments in public service. So she's pointed out that, of course, there's principles there which are meant to make things transparent. And one of Tata's assertions was that it had been opaque. Of course, hiding from the public what they should see as per the Constitution. Interesting one, this, because it's the process, it's not the individuals that they have a problem with. So it's fantastic in terms of setting up structures that will strengthen institutions, as you say. However, they said that they never applied to be members of the commission and were not interviewed as such. A very interesting one. So the Labour Court blocked the newly appointed NLC chairman and his members from assuming office. Interesting one there.
Initially, the Labour Court had actually blocked it so that they listened to the case. Now with yesterday's ruling, everybody else is fine apart from these two. So the commission can actually assume office. They can actually go ahead and get appointed, but these two should not get appointed.
Well, they could just do the whole process again. If it's the process that was flawed, it could be the same people. There's no need to change the president's appointees and do the process correctly. So there's no harm. To me, it's just strengthening institutions. So
they actually, they can actually call in this to...
absolutely, and follow the correct process.
And interview them openly for member. Now, here's the thing, that the selection panel says, when they called in the people who had applied for both positions, because you're told you can apply for either or both. You can apply to be chair or member or both or either, right? So Murugi and Galgalo had applied to be chair and or member. Or member. So when they were interviewed, the selection panel says, we're interviewing them for either position. And it was clear to us that, if you don't get chair, we can, and we find you suitable for member, we'll take you to be member. But the shortlist, which is what Okiya Tata is saying, the shortlist that was published was this are shortlisted for interviews of chairperson. Process again. Right.
So they should have also included a short list of the alternative that they were hoping to interview for, to say that they were interviewing for both.
They should have included.
So it's a matter of process and some technicalities here that were avoided. But I think at the end of these cases, even with process, for instance, even with a ruling on the nullification of the annulment of the elections 3 years ago, 2017, what we need to look at, because processes will have fault from time to time, especially complex processes, especially like elections, for instance. What you look at and what the judges should be deciding on, was it significant enough to have actually altered the results? So in this case, what they should be looking at, I know we want to strengthen our institutions and make sure things are done right, but in not publishing the fact that they were applying maybe for an alternative position, does that actually change anything? So other than maybe pointing out that there'd been a flawed process, you don't need to actually sort of go through the whole. It's costly as well. So what you want to look at is, but for the failure to follow process, or what impact did failing to follow the process have? Because we're going to go through this again, and these two people will still get the positions. And what you'll find, it's just been a costly process, and it's delayed putting together the NLC. So sometimes look at the impact of the failure to follow the process as opposed to just nitpicking.
On the backdrop of Tata's assertions, I think is that the fact that because of the process and the way in which you see that it can get quite sticky, processes that we see across the country, people will then use the fact that a process can be sticky then to be able to push their own particular agenda. And I think that's where he's coming from, to say that, look, we say that it's process and one thing is being named when it's at the application stage that it was chairperson, and then it comes out that they could then be member. Using the process itself then to kind of promote an element of foul play. And I think that is where he was, where his assertions were coming from. And I think we see that, unfortunately, happening quite often, when the process of it then has been blamed for the fact that, this is why this happened, because we had to kind of go through the process. But then the details of it, having not been made transparent, then gets you into a sticky situation in very many instances. I mean, we've seen it with something as grand as elections. National government elections, and that has happened many times, and people say, well, it's the process, we're following the process, and through that it becomes long and winded.
It would actually be precisely what we're saying if we didn't have a backdrop of the Chief Justice complaining the other day about his particular department being starved of cash. one could actually read and say that
this is revisiting.
Yep, the judiciary is saying, okay,
You're complaining now? This is what we
all
were
right,
saying.
okay, we are going to stick it to you.
Let's show you.
Yes.
Let us show you exactly what we mean. So when you said we shall revisit, we can also revisit.
Yes.
This is a situation, it's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're talking about process, setting up of institutions, of course, the relationship between the judiciary and the executive, which I'll also be raising again this morning. There was a meeting yesterday in Naivasha, which the executive sent junior officers again. It's 6:30.
Traffic.
It's 6:30 on Friday morning. Nothing is really happening on the roads. Everybody seems to be happy right about now. Hopefully that doesn't change. Going from east, west, north, south, the city of Nairobi, the traffic situation is not so bad. Vehicles are moving. Nobody's complaining just yet. It looks good. There's some traffic on Thika Road as you join Outer Ring. But apart from that, everything seems to be hunky-dory. If it changes, we'll definitely let you know. If you see something that we should know about, let us know. 0719-012-600. More details coming up in a short while, because at the end of the day, it is Friday, but remember, it is the middle of the month, so we don't have much movement per se. But I will let you know if it changes.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice.
So the judiciary is telling other government agencies, this include the executive and the legislature, that you know what, there are many times when you cut corners and they have implications. This is one instance where the judiciary is telling a selection panel for the National Land Commissioners that you cut corners. You did not go through the entire process as you should, and you should therefore go back and reselect or renominate two persons to join the National Land Commission. You know, it exposes something that actually happens besides the politics of it, of we shall revisit, we are revisiting, we are starving you of budget and all. We have very many cases, and CT keeps raising those ones up, where the executive behaves like it's a know-it-all, it's a one and all. It forgets that we have a new dispensation in this country. One, public participation is key. Two, openness of public information, and everything that you're doing is important, that everybody knows this is what we are doing and this is how we are doing it. Three, processes. If you're supposed to follow a certain process, follow that process, and don't come up with any justification or any kind of excuse to say, we could have done this, it was going to take us too much. It was going to take too much time for us to actually actualize this. So we just went ahead and, cut corners here and there. No, you shall do things the right way. And this actually underpins one of the main reasons why we said that this new constitution has a lot of institutions. These independent commissions, they're independent commissions, they're other institutions. We are building a country of institutions.
Is this
not
the first time?
An executive.
Is this the first time where due process was not followed? And it seems to me that it's also an opportunity for the judiciary to answer, or basically would it be clipped back at what their assertions were just a few weeks ago, just like CT was kind of alluding to previously. It seems to me that they're going to follow this one to the letter, and actually now maybe we see more cases like this come up in the near future, whereby we say, okay, here we are, and you're saying, we're showing you now basically how we are going to do our job, coming from the point of the judiciary, because it doesn't seem to me that this is the first time where you have appointments or applications for job positions and the entire process was not followed to the letter, and there was no transparency in terms of what was happening. And what was the third one that you talked about? Transparency should be open, and then the process it should be open to public opinion, or at least for public information, not public opinion, but information in terms of letting people know what is going on. It's not the first time that we've seen appointments like this, and I can bet you that it's not the only time whereby information was not made clear as per these appointments. But in this case, when it has been brought to the fore, I see that the judiciary is going to take every chance that it gets to make sure it's going to be pointed out rather firmly that, hey, you didn't follow the process, you didn't follow it to the letter of the law, and we're not going to let you get away with it. They didn't bring it up, obviously, Omtata did, and you'll find that in the future, other people would, or there would be other cases, or there would be other proponents, as it were, but they're going to use this, I think, to set an example.
They've already done that actually very many times before. Remember, there was also the nomination of the former Othaya MP to the Employment Authority, which was also halted because, again, same thing, process, qualification, and all, right? So this is not the first time, even with this, within this time frame of the back and forth tussle between the judiciary and the executive. It's not the first time, but even before then, we had this judiciary has been called, it's an activist judiciary. Why is it being called an activist judiciary? Because activists do that all the time. They keep raising fault of government and the processes the government follows. And the cases are taken to court. The judges say, yes, you have a case here. It's true. You did not follow process. And the executive has been complaining about that and saying, come on, you guys are frustrating our efforts to govern. And it's not about the efforts to govern. It's about following due process. It's about recognizing that this is a new dispensation in this country.
If you look at the list that the media provided us with of the judges who were part of that particular group, there were 3 judges who stood out. 3. And these 3 judges, if you look at their track record, one of them is an award-winning judge. Judge Mumbi, award-winning. She has made landmark judgments. Unfortunately, it can be seen as going against the establishment. Now, this is perception here. The moment you have 2 such issues happening alongside each other, one cannot help but juxtapose. You cannot help but
you
compare.
Can see the politics.
Yes, you cannot help but compare and contrast and say, it looks like we're in for a season where the government is actually going to start understanding probably the power of the judiciary. Now, it may actually not be the case. It may just be, it so happened that procedure wasn't followed and they pointed it out. But when you look at this particular instance against the backdrop of the president declining to accept the list that he had been given for appointment. Remember, we have a problem with our Court of Appeal right now, okay, because judges retired, remember. So there's a gap. So against this backdrop, I think if anyone were to assert, if anyone was to put forward the argument that this is the judiciary fighting back, I think they would have grounds for actually putting forward such a case. Yes.
And would the judiciary be justified?
The judiciary can simply be doing what they're supposed to do, but remember,
they're using the tools at their disposal.
Interpretation of the law is something that is left in the hands of the judge. So they can decide how they're going to interpret they will follow the law. They will tell you this is the law, they'll quote statutes, they'll do whatever, and they'll tell you this is the outcome of what I have decided.
It's a case of everybody using what they have at their disposal.
Well, in this case, and
the
I think they're going to
executive has the purse, so they hold on to it. And then, of course, the judiciary has the interpretation, has the legal mandate to interpret law. And they use the same thing.
Well, I think you're going to see, just because of what we'll see as maybe a fight back from the judiciary, whereby it seems that they're going to have to, even in their fighting back, they'll be independent. They're going to probably use that interpretation that you've talked about to fight back. And it's presented, I think, an opportunity for them for anything that then comes before their desk, then to say, okay, this is how we're going to assert ourselves now, and this is how we're going to lay claim to this position that we hold so fast to. We're going to use these as opportunities to say this is what our point would be.
It may not even be
within
the
those
case.
corridors that they can use to fight.
It may not even be the case,
again.
but against this background, that is what will be the perception. They may simply be going about their business as they should, but against this background, where there's already some acrimony,
it would be seen that they're using that to fight back.
The perception that will lend itself to ready acceptance is that these people are hitting back at the executive.
So they're hitting back with one hand, a hard blow, but also giving in to some others. So when the Mwinzi's case, for example, ruling was also delivered yesterday. If we go by that argument, when the Mwinzi would have been declared, somebody who must.
Remember, it's the president who actually appointed this lady. It's the MPs who are kicking the fuss. Yes.
And who does the judiciary have beef with? It's the executive. Not necessarily the legislature.
Yes.
This is one where there was a direct opportunity at hitting right there at the executive and saying, the president, we should not have appointed this person. Anyway, agree with the MPs so that the MPs can give you the money.
MPs actually can't give you the money. They can make decisions as
on what to do with it.
On what to do with it, but the actually giving of it, that on Treasury is done who decides whether they're going to give it to you or not. Yes, I mean, you can have an allocation and it simply won't arrive at you. Look at the beef that the counties have been having with the national government. They know allocations that should be arriving at them, yes. This one is actually a weak example that I'm giving because in many of the cases, the counties haven't met certain statutes that they're supposed to meet in order to receive money, but we've seen it. It is the Treasury that decides whether they're going to get the money or not and when they're going to get it.
So also yesterday, Chief Justice David Maraga was chairing a meeting in Naivasha. All right, this is a meeting that brings together all institutions that deal with justice. It's a meeting on administration of justice, right? Of course, the people who had been invited include the Attorney General, you have the DPP, the DCI, the Inspector General of Police, the Chief Minister, C.S. Matiang'i, was meant to grace the occasion. All those people gave it a wide berth. Apart from the DPP, the senior most person was the DPP. The others gave it a wide berth. The AG's office sent an officer. The police, the DCI sent an officer. Remember what the CJ was complaining of the other day? That I often receive a lot of communication signed by junior officers. Those are the people who are actually sent to talk to me. Not even the senior officers at my level or slightly below. It's completely junior officers who are sent to come and deal with me. It was given to him directly yesterday in Naivasha.
But let me ask the question, okay? We're again discussing perception. These so-called junior officers, do they have the mandate to carry out whatever task they were given? The answer would be yes.
Yes.
Are they legally allowed to sign those letters? The answer again would be yes. So what this gentleman seems to be complaining and saying that he feels he's not adequately respected. Isn't that not so?
Yes.
It's a question of perception. It's a question of perception. We had a time in this country when a president traveled out of the country, almost the entire cabinet would meet the president, and everyone knew when the president left and when they came back. When he was
coming back, yeah.
Yes. And traffic would be halted for hours on end. We've evolved to the point where when the president goes out of the country, half the time you don't even know. When he comes back, maybe chief of protocol and a few people meet him. And that's just it. The president will be on the road. Yes, you'll sense the presence goes, you'll see policemen. You'll be stopped for a short while, and then he go.
passes and goes.
All I'm saying is that all these things is a question of perception. Someone may feel, unless traffic is stopped for 10 hours before I arrive, they're not treating me well. They're not respecting me as the president.
They're not giving me chest cars.
Yes, exactly. I don't feel I'm the president. Now, by the same token, if the Chief Justice feels that every time a letter is written to him, it must be signed by someone of equal rank to him, well, is it that the letter comes from that office? Is it the official who signed it? Is that person legally mandated to do so? If the answer is yes, then there's nothing to complain about.
He didn't complain yesterday. He just said, well, what do you want me to say about that when he was asked? So really, the people who should be attending this are at high level. And previously, those high-level officers are the ones who've been attending those meetings. Well, they've been coming, of course, with their juniors as assistants, but the high-level officers come in.
If those
the AG
junior,
is present, the IG is present, the DCI is present, DPP is present.
If the junior
gravitas, man.
If the junior officers attend that meeting, are you saying that the departments are not adequately represented?
Or the work that was supposed to be carried out would not be carried out by virtue
when
of the fact
the bosses
that
attend the meetings? Who actually carries out the daily?
It's the same junior officers.
These same people who are attending the meeting.
Yeah, but they don't make the decisions. The boss makes the decision.
But they're the ones who keep this vehicle running, as it were. They keep it running, and they basically putting together this information that is now handed to you that you would then use. So then suddenly they lose merit when it comes to presenting such information to you. How? I don't understand.
It's not that they lose merit. It's basically what you're saying, the perception. And the perception here is very clear. Just the same thing we are talking about the case and judgments coming from the court, the perception. The judges are doing their job, but you'll sit back and you will not, one cannot fail to actually question, what are we seeing here? What does it mean? Is it implying something that we are not seeing? And from where I sit, especially from the court ruling of yesterday, I'm saying, this is not fighting between the judiciary and the executive per se. This is basically just the judiciary doing its job and the executive being caught out, deer in the headlights. And of course, they'll try and fight back and say, "Oh, you know, we this is the judiciary trying to show us that we are not doing our jobs." You're not doing your jobs. You should have done this recruitment process properly anyway in the first place. All things, if you are going to appoint somebody to a certain commission, a certain authority, follow due process. Good morning. It's 13 minutes to 7.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
You know, we keep talking about government and the government doing the right thing, right? We have talked here many times.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Case at a school that had a wall that collapsed, and we kept demanding for answers. And the answers just simply never came. There was a team that was tasked to go around the country. And what was the deadline of that? 31st of October. And they were supposed to, hand over the report to the CS, and then we see action being taken on that. It has not happened. We have also raised issues with the ferry. The ferry, 2 people died. Yes, the board has been sent packing. There have been reports that have been published that have said this is the situation on the ground, that, this ferry service has issues. The safety concerns are actually valid. And every day we are seeing safety issues arising. The other day we saw images coming out of the Likoni Ferry Channel, where a bus belonging to a certain university was almost actually plunging into the ocean. Again, same issues of concern. What does the government do? The government, says, government comes up with a reason. We are doing the best we can, just like we heard yesterday from Mombasa. We are doing our utmost best, the best we can to make things right. But that utmost best is what they decide in their own locked boardrooms, and they don't come out to engage with the public and tell them this is what we mean by best we can. So when cases are taken to court and it actually emerges that, wait, you guys are not following the principles of the Constitution, which are that you shall govern by involving and engaging with the citizens, and you're not following the principles of the Constitution and recruitment process by ensuring that the people that you recruit are completely above board and above reproach, the parts of the Constitution on public service and the integrity of public service. This is it. The government can go back and start saying, we are doing the utmost best. It's going to be a costly exercise. What we did is we just looked and so we could have done. You didn't communicate. That is a very important bit. Communication has always been, these governments have always been feeling like they are Sirikali. And here you're being told, no, you're no longer Sirikali. You are Serikali, but you must engage with the people. This is one of those instances.
Well, as far as if I were sitting, if I were to take this perception from the government, you see, if you miss out a detail, let's say there were 10 things you're supposed to do and you miss out on one. The arithmetic, if it was an exam, you've got 9 out of 10. But looks like this exam, the only acceptable mark is 10 out of 10. And it's going to be a difficult lesson to learn, but maybe they will have to learn it.
Remember, every teacher tells you, show your workings, right? In a math exam, you're told, show your working, unless KCPE, where you just shared the choice that you're making. The others, show your working, show how you arrived at this answer. Yes, there's a formula, it's very clear. This is the answer, yes, but how did you arrive at this answer? The process is as important as the result. And that we were told clearly by the Supreme Court in 2017. The process is as important as the result. The president was not on the wrong. The presidential candidates, rather, were not on the wrong. The party agents were not on the wrong. it is the IEBC and the process of counting, transmission, and announcement of the results. That process was flawed. And if it raises questions, if it brings in doubt, then for crying out loud, deal with that. Make sure that you don't have any doubt at all at any point.
Are we saying that processes then can be completely transparent in this country in terms of making it aware to the general public, in terms of having a seamless process, and then at the same time, then making sure that we see what is said is going to be done is actually done?
Yes.
Is it possible to have it completely
The answer
seamless?
is yes, it can.
So then why then does it not
human
happen?
error?
Human error?
Deliberate.
Well, that's
human
what's
error?
debatable, but it's human error. It's human error. Look, if you have a process, what is under discussion, you could apply for both positions, right? And they applied for both positions.
Yes.
So far, no problem.
Yes.
No problem.
Then a list is published of those who applied for the position of chairman. And then a list is not provided for those who applied for just the position of commissioner. And then you appoint them. Now, it's process. Everything was okay up to that particular point. And then you miss out on this little thing and it throws everything out of the window. It's as simple as that.
And what was the significance of that component? This is what I talk about. We can talk about processes and outcomes. The process can be flawed from time to time, but did that flaw actually change the outcome? Would it have changed the outcome? So I'm not arguing for the sake of arguing, but I am presenting the other side in that there will be flaws in processes. So by failing to publish this list, would that have, had they published it, would things have been different? I think it's also important to consider that, especially with complex processes, not such as this one, but with what we saw in the elections, where they said the process was flawed. But the flaws, and no process is without flaw when it comes to something as dynamic and as sort of gigantic and Herculean as an election, a national election.
But if you remember in the election, they actually pointed out what these flaws were. They didn't just say it was a flaw.
And they were major.
Yes, they pointed it out and said there was this.
No,
there
but
was
we
this, there was this.
we had some judges arguing that it would not have changed the outcome. Joaquin Dongo said yes, there was flaws. As with if you look at any elections, there's nothing that's going to be perfect because there's humans involved, there's machines involved. Something could go wrong, or processes might not be as seamless as we would want them to be. But having said that, did that I'll call it a breach in following process, would it affect the outcome? And we need to look at that, because otherwise we start following the law to our detriment, whereby we're missing out on what we're trying to achieve, so that we can follow and we become obsessed with the processes that we forget, for instance, the elections were about democracy and our choice. So once we start negating that because we want to adhere and we're sort of loyal to the processes beyond what is reasonable, then there's a problem. And I think that's the question we need to be asking ourselves.
To begin with?
To give us some structure, but
And they are reasonable, right?
remember the desired objective here is to ensure, for instance, in the election, that democracy wins in terms of, the people's choice is reflected in the outcome.
And it's above
Now,
reproach.
if we start negating from that because of these structures that are in place to help us achieve that, then really we're missing the point. So processes can be there, but we can't let the processes get in the way.
Explain this to me. How do you miss the point when you're actually following a procedure that was set out to achieve the very democracy you're saying? How are we missing the point?
What I'm saying is sometimes if we pay too much heed to the process, to the point where we negate what the process was put there for, which is the outcome to ensure that we get the choice of the people as president, for instance, I'm going back to the elections, then we're not getting it right. The processes are put there to help us, to assist us, to create structures, to ensure that there's an element of fairness and justice.
And the importance of that.
And they're
setting up
absolutely
all those-
important.
And
But
one
given,
of the key points of importance in that is to ensure that this process is beyond reproach, that everybody who participates feels that yes, my voice was heard, my vote was counted, and my choice was considered. Now
this is
if
what
you
I'm
get to a
saying.
point where the process is so murky that there are people who wonder, was my vote even counted? It is fundamental. So yes, there are those. And of course, we've seen very many cases, very many election petitions where people have gone to court and challenged the process and a certain process here and there. And the judges look and say, look, what you're raising, yes, it existed, but it could not have altered anything at the end.
the question,
But if it raises issues of legitimacy of the result, this is by saying that we do not know how transparent this process was of announcing the winner, then it raises issues of legitimacy. Now, legitimacy in an election, that is key.
What I'm trying to say here is we should look at what the flaw was and actually scrutinize that flaw by putting it through a test where we say, but for this flaw, would things have been different? Was this significant a flaw in the process to have changed the outcome? Because otherwise, I will tell you, even in the re-election, even if you were to do the process again, they will be something. It's such a dynamic, complex process. There would have been one returning officer that's made a slight mistake. There would have been somebody who was misadvised. There will always be something with so many people turning up to the ballot box, with so many processes to follow. There will be errors, human errors, as CT called them. Now, those could be counted as not following the process or a flaw in the process. But what we have to look at is, was that flaw significant enough to have changed the outcome? And if the answer is no, then we carry on, because these processes that are put in place, they're actually there to support us. They're pillars to support us reach our desired objective, which is to ensure that the will of the people is reflected in the selection of the president and so on. Now, if we place more emphasis on the process than the actual desired outcome, then we're making a mistake and we're negating from what we're actually trying to achieve. I'm not saying the processes are wrong, but when we pay too much attention to processes and we forget what the result is, then we could start going wrong.
I think it's important to pay a lot of attention
When
to
is
processes.
the attention enough and when is it too much?
It's when we start nitpicking to an end, whereby there's actually some people who want a particular outcome and can use these flaws in the process. Because I want us to focus on the elections. Because
Somebody
I think
can
that
deliberately cause...
absolutely. You will always find, given the nature of what elections are, given the complexity and how dynamic it is, and the scope of it all, there will always be an opportunity to point out a flaw in the process. And it could be the most insignificant, negligible, minute thing, but you will still find something. Now, if we consider that any small flaw in process should actually annul results, then we will never reach a point where we have an election.
But this isn't what we're discussing here.
We're discussing process and the importance of paying heed to the
They're not
process.
small
And this is my point
nitpicking.
exactly. How significant is this flaw? And the way to determine that is to put it through a test to scrutinize the significance of that flaw by saying, would the outcome have been different had there been no flaw?
Yes.
Now,
and in this particular
how do we
case,
determine that?
In this particular case, yes. Because there were names that had been sent to the president for position of member of NLC, right? Names had been sent to the president for position of a chairperson of NLC. Now, there are some people who had applied for member. They went for interview as member. They actually passed with flying colors for position of member, who did not get. Why? Because somebody who had been interviewed for chairperson was brought into this list. But yes, there's somebody who missed out on a job opportunity because of the process that was followed.
And is it them that has brought this to the court?
No, it's somebody who cares for such people.
But for it to be a viable case, must they be the ones to bring it?
No, absolutely not.
It's somebody
But
who
if
cares
they
for
don't
such
feel
people.
hard done by the process, then they're okay with it.
Because they don't...
No, of course, I'm just being silly here.
All right. Yeah, that admission is taken kindly. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's coming up to 7 o'clock. You can join in the conversations as we go along. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. In the next hour, let's go to JKIA and go to Western Kenya, go to London and find out what exactly is happening in this. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, things building up on Mombasa Road, trying to get off the main highway and trying to enter into the city center. Traffic is building up in some spots that is quite difficult to maneuver through, but we'll get there eventually, as it were. It's not so bad. We've had worse situations this week, but today getting off Mombasa Road will not be much of a challenge. All right, coming off of Westlands, coming off of Wacky Way, trying to get into the city. Also, we do have a bit of a hold up, but you'll get there. Coming out of it is not so bad. Thika Road, unfortunately, unfortunately, of course, the usual parking lot scenario has made its debut, as has been for the last few weeks. We don't know why, but it just seems that's going to be. Kiambu Road also is quite a chock-a-block situation. Coming out of there and joining the Thika Superhighway also is causing some problems. All right, Limuru Road is reporting some traffic today, and this is because there was an accident around that area this morning, so trying to get that out of the way and to get people moving is what was causing some problems. Not so bad after that. Mombasa is actually reporting that not so much traffic around the city this morning. Around the town, getting in and out off of Moy Avenue and coming out is not so bad. It might change later, but we'll see and we'll let you know. Langata Road also coming out towards the T Mall roundabout is coming out slow, but it is moving, joining Bagavi Way or heading towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout as well.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Thank you very much for joining us. This is The Situation Room. It's 3 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning. Happy Friday. It's broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We're broadcasting to Mombasa on 87.9. Kisumu, good morning, 102.5. Nakuru, 96.0. Eldoret, 96.7. 90.9 in Nyeri. 97.7 in Malindi. Spice FM KE on Facebook and YouTube, and our website www.spicefm.co.ke. So, names of certain individuals. Is it Isaac Shivonje? Is it Paul Manyasi? Is the person who fell over 1 kilometer from the sky into a London estate? Was that person even Kenyan?
Well, okay. You're going to bring in some kind of conspiracy here, but I think here we are presented with certain facts, presented with certain opinions, certain speculations of what could actually be the problem. But if we just want to open it up a little bit today and hear that, okay, someone fell out of the sky, fell into a London suburb, and that was quite weird. And then the investigations took place 3 months ago, and several assertions were being made, different questions were being asked, and people made certain I guess would be made expressions. Father said, "This is my son." Mother said, "Yes, this is my son, but we cannot bury him. We don't have the money to bring him here. Just let him be buried in the US, or rather in the UK." When this story now broke and was in all over Kenyan media, suddenly then denials were being made, and so we had the runaround in terms of whose was he. Is his name Paul Manyasi? Is his name Isaac Shivonje? Is his father Isaac Bet? Is his father Isaac Manyasi? Who is his father? As of yesterday, we then heard that somebody called Isaac Shivonje, who is the son of Isaac Bet, according to the father, is at Industrial Area Remand Prison, and he's there for having had a case brought against him of defiling a child, and his father hopes that he would be out on bond. KAA has denied that there is such a person on their payroll, has denied that such a person works for Colnet, who's contracted with cleaning services within the airport. And all of this round and about has taken the attention off the fact that we, whether we want to look at it or not, have had a serious security lapse at an airport which should have the highest levels of security, number one. And then I want to say that it means that it's very possible that very many people have actually slipped through the cracks and made their way out to other countries, again seeking for greener pastures. So all the stories and the runabout and the denials and the assertions has taken our eyes away from the fact that somebody got into a restricted area and of a level 1 airport operation and was able to do this, and there our attention is being taken away off of that, and we're looking at all these details that at the end of the day, when we look at it really closely, may not really matter.
So you're saying we are diverting our attention. We're focusing elsewhere where we should not be focusing.
We're in terms of where of what we should not be focusing on or not. The fact is that we are not focusing on what is really important when it comes to security lapses in a level 1 category 1 establishment as an airport, whereby in an area where this gentleman fell from, obviously he was dead before he hit the earth. He should not have been in the first place. And it is very easy for our attention to be taken off that fact with all of the elements that we're being dizzied with here back and forth. Whose son was he in? What was he? Is he in prison or not? Was the story done? Did Mzungu come and do a story and actually take away from the authenticity and genuineness of our journalism here in this country? And did we wait for him actually to come and do the story before we knew what was going on? Who denied and who did not deny? Who said and did not say? Whose son is he and whose son was he not? My goodness. At the end of the day, somebody was in an area where they should not have been, and that's where our focus should be on. And that's what I'm saying. And here, when the things of conspiracy and cover up and those words are being used, I dare say that they should be allowed into the conversation, because that's really what is happening here. And we're not looking at the fact that this should not have happened in the first place. And then you want to ask yourself the question as well, how many more cases of this do we have that have actually not come to light?
Of stowaways or people falling from the sky?
Of stowaways, people who've again
of successful stowaways,
of successful stowaways. There could have been very, very many more, and the way in which they're using to get out of the country, obviously, is something
get into
the areas where they now used to get
country.
Out of the country. Definitely should be a cause of concern. And when we look at security lapses, especially at an airport, then that should be cause for concern.
You know what I find concerning, since you brought this topic up, is how porous are our borders?
Exactly.
Because if you're talking about people leaving the country to go elsewhere, we have situations where people come into our country and they do so illegally. Mm-hmm. And how many of them actually come into the country? And how do we manage this? Because this is as much a security concern as is the airport, because this is one individual. And it's good that it should raise a concern. But what if you have borders that allow in thousands, and if not thousands, hundreds of thousands?
With the knowledge of the security officers or the security forces at the borders.
Because that is a serious and genuine danger. Because among the people who come in, they may have justifiable concerns. They're running away for some problems, seeking greener pastures, whatever the case. But alongside that group, you may have genuine terror elements who do not wish the country well.
Well, we've seen them come in. Those who participated in the Westgate attack just slipped into the country from other countries. They came in, they stayed here for a couple of days, they conducted their operation. We're told that they were killed. But yes, it does happen a lot. In fact, even security agencies keep telling us, look out for so-and-so. He's suspected to have crossed over from Somalia last week. They're somewhere in the country. So it happens. Because the border is not a wall. It happens. Often.
You know, what really are we debating here? Are we trying to look at the strength of our security within the airports, our security in general? Are we discussing stowaways and why it is that they should, why they exist?
I think the crux of the matter here is actually our security in general. And this is, if you look at it here, it's KAA actually fighting any bad publicity, which could of course affect their licensing, their license to fly as a last point of departure. There's certain certification they get. If you remember, it took a while, and we celebrated the fact that we could finally fly direct to the US. There's certain stipulations, certain levels of security, customer service, and so on that you have to provide. So what's happening with this story? It exposes some weakness and some cracks in KAA. Of course, here it's because they'd outsourced a certain service to Colnet, who's also subsequently denied that this person exists. But at the crux of the matter here, it's KAA trying to protect its reputation because there's a lot at stake here. It could lose if it's seen to have such flaws and such sort of gaps and holes in its security. Then you could have a lot of airlines actually retract what you call this last point of departure certificate. So I think that's why we're seeing sort of this blame and counter blame and denial where the parents have even denied their child. In my opinion, this is exactly who the Sky News
parents haven't denied
report.
their child.
They've denied that this is their child.
Yeah, the parents are saying...
After having said that it was.
After having said that it was, and having mourned about it. And we also have the Sky News reporter. He'd actually spoken to people at KA, or rather at Colnet, and they narrated how they'd been told by their boss, somebody has gone missing, but please don't reveal any of this information. And we have to look at it at what... agenda does the Sky News reporter, other than sort of giving the full story and trying to understand it, what agenda does he have? Why would he be lying? What story would he be pushing? To what end?
You may not know to what end
I'm not saying,
be, or whether even he has any ulterior motives, but also always when you look at how a story is told, there are gaps that emerge in a story, and
absolutely,
it's normal.
Yeah, he could have done this to sell,
or you may actually have gone and gotten a story, but then you realize later that the story that you have carried, you have been played or you have been misled by your informers.
Why not just do a DNA test?
We saw stories of, in fact, we even carried it on KTN a couple of years ago, where somebody was found in Meru, and it was alleged and thought this is the runaway Rwanda fugitive Felician Kabuga. And later it emerged that the man actually in question, the man in the photo, came out and said, I am surely, everybody in this village knows
my
me.
doppelganger.
I live here. I am Kenyan. I am Meru. I am not Felician Kabuga. And yet the story, the way it had been told, even using, informers who are former police officers, these are CID people who said we had guarded this person. It actually happens. And it's not because the journalist is incompetent, but gaps will emerge in stories from time to time. And I'm seeing this is a particular case here where gaps are emerging in a story from time to time. Not that the journalist who did the story is incompetent, not that the people are trying to cover up, it's just gaps in a story.
But if you look at the evidence here, you've got the victim's girlfriend, according to Sky News, saying that the pair worked as cleaners at JKI and that Banyasi went missing at the end of June.
Yes.
So if you look at the facts, and sometimes you don't need evidence in order to have an opinion.
This is a report
absolutely,
by one
but
person
he's backing it up. He's spoken to the girlfriend, he spoke to the parents, he's got evidence.
And nobody
Whereas
else is
in the
corroborating.
denial,
Nobody else is
denial,
corroborating this
the parents initially did,
Hold
and
on.
then they
Parents
changed
initially
their
said-
mind. You
Hold
don't
on.
find that
Hold on,
dodgy somewhat?
On record.
Let me say this.
Why would you say that this is my son?
Let me
and then
finish
he
what I
is
was saying.
dead?
Nobody has corroborated this particular woman's assertion that I was in a relationship with somebody called Paul Manyasi, right? And nobody else has said, yes, indeed, what Ndu is telling you about Eric is true, because Eric and Ndu
But
had a relationship,
this
and
guy
Eric has gone
reporter
missing.
seems to have gone to great lengths then to, concoct all this. You ask yourself, to what end?
It's not to concoct.
I
like
see.
I'm saying,
Whereas with
stories,
the KAA
you will
and
do
Colnet,
a story. You will do a story to the end, to completion, and then gaps will emerge at some point, and you realize there was some error somewhere.
yes,
that
but
was
why would
committed.
somebody come up and claim to be his girlfriend and speak to this Sky News reporter? Why would these parents admit that this is their child and then change their mind? You can see with Colnet and KIA, I've just given you reasons why they would want to deny that they had any association
Or
with this
maybe
particular
not. They are
gentleman.
not denying. They're
They
basically
are.
saying
They
we
are
do not
saying he
have
doesn't
any-
work for us.
Yes,
They're
we
saying
don't
who
have
he is.
anybody
They're saying we
called
don't know who
Paul
he is.
Manyasi who
And
works here.
remember,
Eric,
there's
can we-
employees there.
Can we agree that there's conflicting information.
There is.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
can we see that there's somebody who is
And the conflicting
benefiting from their
information-
information? It's a defense as opposed to,
Not
you know,
necessarily.
there's a reason. Because you have, listen, there's the girlfriend who said they work together.
There's a woman who says
Yes.
she's a girlfriend.
There's then an employee who has said that they were told somebody is missing, but let's not talk about it, keep this to yourself. And then, let's look at the, it's
not
circumstantial.
It's not a third person.
The
It's the same
evidence
woman.
is circumstantial. I'm
Same
not saying,
woman. Same woman is the one who says we were told.
No, it's not the same woman. The girlfriend is completely different. She talks about the fact that they were planning to get married and he went missing at the end of June. And then you have an employee,
Which other employee
somebody
is this?
else altogether.
Which other employee is
According, I don't have the name. According to Sky News,
Man or woman
he
in the
spoke
story?
to an employee. A woman spoke to an
It's the
employee.
same woman,
No,
Jerry.
do you know how many
It's
women
in the
there are
same-
in Kenya? Come on.
See, read the
You
story
can't
again.
make such
Read and watch the
No,
story
no, no,
again.
no.
You're
And
getting the
then-
story wrong.
No, no,
Jerry.
I'm not.
She was
Sky-
interviewed and she said, "You know what happened? Yes, we were at work together on this particular day. He worked on the inside, I was on the outside, or vice versa. And at the end of the day, I didn't see him. And then the following day, we were told that there's one of us who's missing, and we were not told who. This information will come out. Don't.
Do you think
spread
she had
this
to be told that
information."
he's missing if it
Right?
was the girlfriend?
So what I'm saying is, it's the same person.
Okay,
Right?
that's neither here nor there. It's immaterial. There's been a case of a woman claiming
One
I'm the
person.
girlfriend, and then there's been somebody being asked. We can say it's the same person or not, but there've been
We
because
cannot
it's a
say the
different.
same
No,
person.
it's a different
It's in
piece
the
of
story.
evidence. It's a different piece of evidence,
By the same
which
person.
is that the employees spoke to them and said, do not speak about this. There's somebody who's gone missing. That is a different, the fact that whoever the witness is irrelevant. In court, it's a piece of evidence that is different from the fact that his girlfriend has spoken.
And this was at the
Yes?
same time
And
that
then
they realized
the
somebody fell out of the
parents
sky in
had
London.
initially accepted and were mourning. The mother was crying for this child.
Yes, she
So-
was shown a picture
No.
of somebody who looks like her son, and then she
Oh,
was shown,
good Lord, I'm a mother. I know exactly.
Yes.
You cannot show me any picture
No,
of
in this
anybody.
particular case, I'm trying to speak like a lawyer here.
And
I'm
I
trying to speak like a
conflate
lawyer
it with
here.
my son.
She
I
was
know
shown
what
a
my son
picture.
looks like.
She
Eric
was
is
shown a
simply
picture.
going by what was reported.
Yes,
in the paper.
she was shown
Now,
a
what I
picture.
am
and
saying
the
is-
He's
picture.
not- he's
Hold on.
not-
If we
not-
look at the circumstantial evidence.
Look at the story, how the story is going. The parents were shown a picture, and they were told, "Is this your son?" And they said, "Yes, this is our son." When the last time you saw him? 10 years ago is when he left home. He's been in Nairobi. Well, we've been communicating. The father says, in fact, we had an altercation with him a couple of months back.
Okay.
Over something
But
or the other.
at
Over
that
the
point,
phone?
let's look at
Over
how
the phone.
based on
Right.
that, let's look at then how this now morphed into something else. If at this point the father then is saying that this Paul Manyasi that you're speaking of is not my son is actually Shivonje, and he is at industrial area, why then did he not say this in June? Why didn't he say in June when he was asked, around June, July, when he was asked?
Is it possible for you?
No, why didn't he say?
I have a mild suspicion
Why
KAA
didn't-
has
why-
spoken to
why
the
didn't
parents,
he say
paid them
at
some
that
money,
point
and
that
asked
my
them to
son-
change their story?
Why didn't he say
And
at
I have
that
another
point?
feeling. I have
hold on,
another feeling
hold
that
on.
between
Why did
June-
he say
between
at-
August,
wait,
when the
now,
story was done, I'm answering the
wait,
question. You've already
I've not asked.
Ask it again.
Small,
Ask it
small.
again. Why didn't
he say at that point that my son is in jail?
All right,
has
can
been
I answer
arrested?
that question?
And,
Because it's the same
and then
question.
because just a day after this story came out is when he now said my son is actually in jail.
My thinking of this is between that time and now, the father has actually realized where his son is.
He didn't know before.
He
Listen,
didn't.
these hunches of yours are baseless, Eric.
No,
Look
even
at the
yours
facts
of
here.
KAA visiting the home is baseless. You have
Circumstantial.
nothing to prove.
They've changed their
that
mind.
KAA has
There's
paid
people who have
anybody,
spoken to the
Jerry.
mother, and she's been crying and mourning the death of her son.
Because
how that story
because-
changed?
because-
What, it was a
because
case of
people
mistaken
came-
identity?
Because people came to her home and told her, your son is dead. Showed her pictures. Is this your son? Yes, this is my son. All right, he died. We
And
are
then
sorry-
now suddenly,
we are sorry
actually,
to
no,
be the
your
ones to
son.
come and tell
Actually,
you.
no, your son is actually in prison for having molested a child.
So they just found out within
They
a
found
day.
out.
Not
within a day of
You
the
see,
story that the
day
son
you,
was
the
in
day
jail.
you saw the story is not the day they were interviewed.
Exactly.
It's
So
not.
there's no way
Between
that the
the
son
day-
was arrested on Friday after the story came out, and then they found out on
No.
Monday that he
But
was in
folks-
Did
industrial
you
area.
talk?
Why
Did
are
you
you
talk to
discussing
the
this
parents
thing?
on Friday?
Why
Now-
are you discussing this thing as though it all happened in one day?
That's what I'm saying.
This
It's
story
over-
has been unfolding and it's
over
going to continue
time.
unfolding.
Exactly.
Now,
And
what
this
I am
is the
saying,
problem.
and I am certain
this
of-
is the problem. At the end of the day, somebody entered into a restricted area in an airport and the security was lax and somebody also fell out of the sky, and you see all of this that we've spent the last 20 minutes doing is exactly what we shouldn't be doing, because it takes the light away from the fact that security conditions were lax.
For us to start answering that question, we
At
need
the
to
end of the day,
identify the
somebody
person. All right,
fell out
we are
of
at
the
the point
sky.
of identifying who is this person who fell out of the sky. Then we can go work backwards and see how did they enter.
Now,
This
what
area,
I'm
how did they
perplexed
get
by
onto the plane?
is at this day and age, can they not do a DNA test with the parents and determine who his parents are and who this gentleman is?
They should
It's,
be
it's
able
not
to.
that difficult.
Maybe that's
And
the next
this would
stage.
expose KAA. You can see why KAA needs to
Or
control
maybe
the story.
it'll
This is
expose
crisis
something
management.
else.
This is it perhaps.
Yes.
I'm telling you what I feel, and it's based on a lot of circumstantial evidence. There's not enough case for me there for reasonable doubt. It's quite clear that KAA is defending themselves here because of what they stand to lose, what is at stake. Because KAA
All right.
wouldn't even be that heavily involved. They would issue
So
a
let me
statement
ask
and
you,
They
leave
would have
Jerry,
it.
just
let
said,
me
look,
ask
if
you,
this
Jerry.
gentleman
As far
does
as
not
going
work for us, we
to
don't
Jerry.
know,
Western
we
to
move
speak
on.
to the parents.
Jerry, KAA did not learn of this on the day the story aired, right?
They knew
KAA
it
did not
3
learn of
months
this.
ago when
Did
the
not
guy
learn
came in
of
the
this
country.
on the day the journalist came and said, "I want to speak to you." KAA learned of this on the day the man fell from the sky.
I don't
That's
think
clear.
they
That's
thought
on
it
obvious.
that
Yes.
let me just continue with this. On that same day, investigations began, and London Met Police started their investigations. Of course, you expect that the London Met Police went traced back into KAA and Kenya Airways, and the investigation both here and in London began. One of the things that of course you do is you think, who has access to this restricted area? Because that is, on the air side, it's a completely restricted area. Who has access to this? We have the people who have access to this. Access to that is actually via biometric. If you're a worker, it's biometric access. If you're a passenger, it's just a passenger that you go. You cross over and enter into the airspace. Onto the air side, if you've been cleared by the airport staff. Now, if they went and checked in their database and they did not find any person who has, not accessed the airport since that day,
Well, they're likely
The
to say
operative
that. They're
word
bound
being
to
not
say
likely
that.
to
The
say. We're talking
operative
about,
word
we're talking
being
about Kenya.
if.
We're talking about Kenya
Anyway,
police. We're
either
talking
way, the
about
bottom
Kenya
line
police.
is there's been
If.
some
We are talking
breach
about-
at KAA.
There's
And
Kenya
KAA
police,
should accept that and look at
and
ways
they
to cover
haven't
that.
denied it.
No, they're denying
No,
it.
no.
They're looking
Their
for ways. They're saying we
statements-
don't have such a guy. We don't.
Their
They're
statement
going
is not
about
saying
crisis
nobody
management.
boarded the plane.
Okay,
Their
that-
statement is saying Paul Manyasi does not work here.
Okay, Eric, you're going to have to look at this.
It's
with-
responding to a particular story,
That
not
is fine.
the fact
but
that
the
nobody
point
boarded.
is very clear that it was even notified, or we were notified of the fact that over time, when these investigations were taking place, before the story was written, this information was sent to KAA, and they were asked, "Can you confirm or deny before this goes to press?" And no answers were given. After the story ran is when KAA decided to say something about it. You must also admit that when you don't give people information, when you refuse to say something, you're actually giving them fodder upon
100%
which to
in agreement with you.
speculate.
By the
There-
way,
I'm 100% in agreement with you. True.
Your point is made, but people who stow away on planes are not that many.
Now, this is what I'm saying.
No,
They're not that many, but what
and
you do,
it doesn't
you give,
happen very
It's
often.
not a regular thing.
It's,
No, in
it's
fact,
not about the
it's
number.
completely regular. Actually, there's something I'm trying to say here. I'm actually trying to support you. So if you let me continue, you'll actually realize that I'm actually supporting your point.
Come on, Oga.
But if you continue this way, I will actually change my
I'll
mind.
change. Go
Okay.
ahead, City.
Between the years 2004, that is January, and March 2015, the UK only reported 6 stowaways.
Did they survive?
No, they tend not to survive. Now, these 6 that we're talking about were the ones who actually found on the plane before the planes even took off, but they had gotten to the plane, right? In the US, this is interesting. From 1947 to 2012, they only had 96 people. Meaning it doesn't happen very often. What is certain is that literally everyone who actually manages to get on that plane and manages to take off with the plane never survives.
Never survives
Okay?
because of the elements.
So, why am I bringing up this issue? Yes, there was a security lapse. But in all honesty, in terms of statistics, I do not think that airports and the authorities that function, that manage airports, consider it to be that massive an issue for them to be running around chasing their tails trying to cover it up? I don't think so.
No. Don't
One
underplay
story,
or undermine
no.
the importance of what has happened.
You are overstating
because
it.
I am not, and this is why you're seeing KAA reacting the way they are. I mean, it's indicative, it's evocative of what could go wrong.
Let me
Placing bombs.
read KAA's statement. Right. So KAA's statement has not said that there was no stowaway. They're saying Kenya Airports Authority would like to issue the following clarification on the Sky News article issued today on the identity of the stowaway on flight KQ100 to London. A security multi-agency team has conducted investigations on the allegations made in the news article to the effect that the stowaway worked at JKIA, and we want to state the following. 1. Colnet Limited is a cleaning company contracted by Kenya Airports Authority. The name Paul Manyasi does not appear in the JKIA staff register. 2. All staff working at the airport require an access pass. The name Paul Manyasi does not appear in the airport pass biometric register. They are dealing specifically to this news article, and the news article had identified the person as Paul Manyasi. They are not saying that there was no stowaway. They are not saying that there was no security breach. They're just saying, was this person Paul Manyasi?
Well,
and they're saying Paul Manyasi does not exist
This
here.
is what happens when you outsource, and that you can start to compromise the standards of service. If they've outsourced the cleaning facility or the cleaning service to Colnet, then maybe it was Colnet that messed up. So I don't think KA actually can speak about this.
They can.
I know what they've said.
So within their premise, sure.
This is it. KAA has contracted somebody. All these other Colnet is one of the cleaning companies.
We know how rigorous Colnet is. Hold on. Do we know how rigorous Colnet is in establishing maybe a fake ID that he used at some point when he came to Nairobi? This is the thing.
That's the thing.
Maybe this is what he did.
The issue here is, does Njeri Thorne
of course
work at Standard Media? All right? If Njeri Thorne does work at Standard Media, then she got a pass. And this pass, she produced an ID, whether it was fake or not.